We don't actually know much about Dirk Hartog. We have no image of him at all. There are a few documents to do with births and marriages and his burial in the new church in Amsterdam. But after he had landed at Dirk Hartog Island, he then went to Makassar. He returned, in fact, to the Netherlands in 1618. He left the service of the VOC, went into private trading, but by 1621 he was dead, and that's really all we know about him. Very little written record, and in fact his most important written record is, of course, the dish that he had inscribed and placed at Cape Inscription. The VOC was the United Dutch East India Company. It was created in 1602 when they sought to bring a number of competing companies together under a monopoly of Dutch trade into the Far East as they saw it. It was the beginnings, if you like, of capitalism and shareholder capitalism as we know it today, because the organisation that companies have today is directly descended from the way those voyages were financed, and the profits were shared amongst the shareholders. Spices, they were such a fantastic commodity to trade. It's a little difficult to understand quite why the profits were so high, but the control of access to the spice trade had been over the centuries tightly controlled by various groups monopolising it. Black pepper, cloves, cinnamon, spices like this, and they came from very restricted areas, small islands in Indonesia, where their cultivation and their harvesting had been very, very closely guarded. They were, of course, used for flavouring, for medicine, for a whole range of things. But I think it was also the emergence of a wealthy middle class in Europe, and it was a conspicuous consumption. Using spices in your entertainment lavishly, in a sense, was proving how wealthy. It was a status symbol. When the Dutch first attempted to challenge the Portuguese monopoly of the spice trade, they followed the old Portuguese route. So leaving from ports such as Amsterdam or Texel, they'd make their way down to the Cape of Good Hope and then up the east coast of Africa and then across the Arabian Gulf and through to India and into what is today Indonesia. Moving up the African coast, they often became becalmed. It was very dependent upon the monsoon patterns, and it would usually take close to a year to sail from northern Europe to what is today Indonesia. In 1611, Heinrich Brouwer, a captain with the VOC, pioneered a new route to the East Indies. Instead of moving up the east coast of Africa, he took advantage of the strong winds and currents that blew at latitude 40, or the famous Roaring Forties, and then would take the boat north to try and make a direct line for Indonesia. Following the publication of the success of Brouwer's route, many Dutch skippers began to use this route and cut the time to the East Indies by half, from a year to possibly 6 months. This included Dirk Hartog. It was during his voyage in 1616 that the VOC made the Brouwer route the official route for all Dutch ships. Despite the commonly held belief that the Dutch often discovered parts of Australia by accident, and that this was due to the fact that for while latitude was easily calculable, it was very difficult to calculate longitude except under certain conditions. It's certainly not the case that Dirk Hartog didn't know where he was. He certainly did. He was making his way to Makassar by the quickest route and was exactly on course. After 3 weeks at the Cape of Good Hope, Dirk Hartog set sail eastwards, taking advantage of the Roaring Forties, the strong winds and currents at that latitude. He sailed for 1,000 Dutch miles before he turned to the north, making his way to Makassar in eastern Indonesia when he discovered Dirk Hartog Island in the west coast of Western Australia. Dirk Hartog Island is situated just above the western finger of Shark Bay. It extends out into the Indian Ocean and encloses part of Shark Bay. On the 25th of October 1616, the Endracht made landfall at Dirk Hartog Island, and a party went ashore, climbed the cliffs at Cape Inscription, which is a little bit of a challenge, and they then put a pewter dish. The dish itself was flattened out and then inscribed with who he was, the name of the supercargo, the ship, where they'd come from and where they were going. And this was nailed to a post and stuck in a cliff. The leaving of inscribed dishes, or it could be boards, wooden boards, was quite a common practice then. It was in fact a form of communication. If you can imagine, put yourself back then, people are travelling on areas that they've never been before. So in some sense, it's a pointer to where people have been. Interestingly, if you go there, it completely breaks the skyline and would be clearly visible from the sea. So some mariner sailing close by would see it very obviously and would come ashore and find it. So it could be pointing to this is where I've been, and importantly, this is where I'm going in case there's a need to try and find the person. Dirk Hartog Island is a rather wonderful place, very difficult to get to and very difficult to drive across, and most probably only has something like 600 or 700 visitors a year. They're attempting to return it to what it would have been like in 1616. It had been stocked with sheep in particular and goats. The sheep were taken off earlier when it became a national park, and there is a process now where they're trying to eradicate all the goats and the cats and bring it back to what it would have been like. The island itself is dominated in the south by large, huge sandhills. It is beautiful, but a harsh environment. But the marine life, to stand at Cape Inscription and look out and look at the humpback whales and whale sharks that move up and down the coast, is really a great privilege. Cape Inscription, as the name implies, has been named after the fact it was there that Dirk Hartog left his famous flattened dish. But he wasn't the only one to leave flattened and inscribed dishes on Cape Inscription, because in 1697, another Dutchman, de Vlaming, arrived, found the flattened dish that had fallen from the post. He then took it with him, first to Batavia in modern-day Jakarta, and eventually it found its way back to Amsterdam, where it is in the Rijksmuseum. But he also left a dish himself, which was flattened and inscribed both with what Dirk Hartog had written and then a similar inscription about who he was, who his supercargo was and where they were going. This, in turn, was later souvenired by the French explorer de Freycinet, taken with him, and it was in fact wrecked off the Falkland Islands in the Uranie, but was saved and later taken back to France. We can surmise that because the Dutch didn't seek to exploit this discovery, that the reports that Dirk took back to Batavia were not particularly encouraging. In fact, while the VOC was primarily interested in trade, exploration, of course, could lead to trade. So they were always prepared to try and look for other land masses, and indeed after Dirk Hartog they did map most of the western coast of Australia. However, they found no obvious opportunity for trade, and so while they might have charted the waters, they sought not to either settle or investigate further.